Right, good afternoon, everyone. This hearing will come to order. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. I appreciate it very much, and we definitely look forward to your testimony. Small businesses are disproportionately burdened by the cost of regulations in comparison to their larger counterparts by virtue of their size and resources. And despite the economic downturn and painfully slow recovery, the regulatory burden on small businesses continues to grow. Increased regulations mean small businesses must dedicate more time, more money, and resources to complying with the regulations instead of doing what they do best, and that is creating jobs and innovative new products. To ensure that federal agencies analyze the impact of new regulations on small businesses, Congress enacted the Regulatory Flexibility Act, or the RFA. The RFA requires all federal agencies to examine the impact of their proposed and final rules on small businesses, small not-for-profits, and small government jurisdictions. If those impacts are significant, the agency is required to consider less burdensome alternatives. The RFA has been on the books for some 30 years, but federal agencies still fail to comply or fully comply with both the letter and spirit of the law. And unfortunately, the Environmental Protection Agency is not meeting its legal obligations under the RFA. And by failing to comply with the RFA, the Environmental Protection Agency imposes unnecessary burdens on small businesses instead of using small businesses to their input to craft better tailored regulations that address specific problems. Last December, the Regulatory Flexibility Improvements Act of 2011, which was H.R. 527, and I co-wrote along with the House Judiciary Chairman Lamar Smith, passed the House. And H.R. 527 will strengthen the RFA and close the loopholes that agencies exploit to avoid complying with the RFA. H.R. 527 is stalled in the Senate, and the President has threatened to veto it. Unfortunately, the failure to act on H.R. 527 seems to be indicative of the Administration's attitude toward small businesses and our struggling economy, apathetic and out of touch. And today we'll be hearing directly from small businesses on how EPA's regulations are affecting their ability to compete and create jobs. And additionally, we'll be examining the EPA's compliance with the RFA. Again, I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today and for your participation. And we will move right on into your opening statements. And basically, to explain the lights to you, each have 5 minutes. And once it gets down to 1 minute, the light will turn yellow, and then past the 5 minutes, it'll turn red, so that you have a moment beyond that to go ahead and give your testimony. But again, we look forward to all of you being here. And our first introduction is going to be Mr. Keith Holman, who currently serves as a legal and policy counsel at the United States Chamber of Commerce in their Environmental, Technology, and Regulatory Affairs Division. Prior to working for the U.S. Chamber, Mr. Holman was a regional counsel for the Environmental Protection Agency and an assistant chief counsel in the Office of Advocacy for the Small Business Administration. As Assistant Chief Counsel, Mr. Holman advocated for the interests of small businesses before the EPA and the Department of Energy and reviewed the small business impacts from federal rulemakers involving air quality. Again, thank you for being here. Look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Graves, and members of the committee. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Keith Holman. I am the Legal Policy Counsel at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce has approximately 96% of its membership, which is small businesses. So the Regulatory Flexibility Act is actually very important to the Chamber and its members. You have asked me to offer the Chamber's views today on how the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is actually complying with the Regulatory Flexibility Act, or we call it the RFA. And as you said, between 2002 and 2010, I was an assistant chief counsel at the SBA Office of Advocacy, and I had primary responsibility for working with the EPA on RFA compliance matters on their rulemaking. So this is an issue I'm very familiar with. I think it's fair to say that when Congress passed the RFA back in 1980, it's hard to believe it's been around this long. The idea was to give small entities, and that's small businesses, small associations, and small communities, some sort of voice in the federal rulemaking process. Put simply, the RFA requires federal agencies to assess the economic impact of their planned regulations on small entities and to consider alternatives that would lessen those impacts. The RFA requires each Federal agency to review its proposed and final rules to determine if a rule in question will have what is known as a significant economic impact on a substantial number of small entities. If the rule will in fact have that impact, which we call a SISNOS, the agency must assess the anticipated economic impacts of the rule and evaluate whether there are alternatives that would actually allow the impact of the rule to be minimized on small entities, but would still accomplish the regulatory objectives of the rule. Now, EPA, looked at, particularly as an agency, writes a lot of rules every year. They are one of the most prolific rule-writing agencies of all the Federal agencies. For that reason, back in 1996, Congress decided to require EPA, when it goes through rulemakings, to go through an additional step other than just looking at the impact of their regulations. They have to do what is actually known as a Small Business Advocacy Review Panel. The panel process is triggered whenever there is a rule that they anticipate will have a substantial economic impact on a significant number of small entities. Since 1986, EPA has done more than 30 of these panels. Small entity representatives who speak for the agencies that will be impacted by the rule are invited to come in and have face-to-face meetings with EPA, with advocacy, and with the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, which is at the Office of Management and Budget. This is a unique opportunity for small businesses to actually sit down with the agency that is going to regulate them and say, here's how this rule is going to affect me. It's very valuable. It does take time and it takes some resources. But in my experience, it's been extremely valuable very early in the process before you actually get a rule that goes to proposal, before the public ever sees it. You're giving a chance for small entities to actually sit down with the agency, ask questions, get feedback, understand the rule that's actually going to apply to them, and have some ability to help in the design of the rule as it is finalized. This has been a very, very valuable process. I worked on 9 panels during my time at SBA's Office of Advocacy. Those panels were very valuable. 3 examples I give in my written testimony were the cooling water intake panel, the Lyme MACT panel, and something called the MSAT panel, which was a rule for mobile source air toxics. Why were they good? Because EPA did a very good job of getting the information pulled together early on, meeting with the small entities, doing a really good job of trying to figure out who they were, how they were going to be affected, and what the potential alternatives would be that would help them. Finding the alternatives is crucial. Since 2009, what we've seen is EPA has not been doing the same good job, particularly with panels. 3 things have been problems with panels. They don't do panels when they're supposed to do them. This has been a problem with the greenhouse gas rules, with things like the coal ash rule, and with many other rules where EPA just doesn't do the panel. Or they say, well, we've agreed to a court deadline, so we don't have time to do a panel correctly. So they don't go through the steps to do a panel correctly. And I outlined some situations where that's happened publicly in the last 4 years or so. Finally, there are situations where you do a panel, they take the time to do the panel, but they don't follow the panel's recommendations. This is a critical problem for the process. Thank you.
Our next witness is Mr. Frank Knapp, who is the Vice Chairman of the American Sustainable Business Council and President of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Knapp, we appreciate you coming in and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Graves, members of the committee.
Yeah, you might turn your mic on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Chairman Graves, members of the committee, I'm Frank Knapp, Jr., President and CEO and co-founder of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce and Vice Chair of the American Sustainable Business Council. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. The South Carolina Chamber of Commerce is a statewide advocacy organization with over 5,000 members that promotes more small business-friendly state and federal government. The American Sustainable Business Council, founded in 2009, and its members now represent over 150,000 businesses and more than 300,000 entrepreneurs, owners, executives, investors, and business professionals across the country. These diverse business organizations cover the gamut of local and state chamber of commerce, microenterprise, social enterprise, green and sustainable business groups, local living economy groups, women business leaders, economic development organizations, and investor and business incubators. I had the opportunity to read the testimony of Mr. Holman, representing the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Merrick, representing the National Association of Remodeling Industry, prior to preparing my comments. And I commend them for their civility of their remarks and their focus on the Regulatory Flexibility Act as it pertains to the Environmental Protection Agency. Both gentlemen recognize the importance of the Regulatory Flexibility Act for ensuring that regulations are reviewed to determine if they are too burdensome for small businesses and if the goals of regulations can be achieved in alternative methods. They pointed out some instances where the business community and EPA didn't agree, but they also point out successful RFA stories. In 2004, my South Carolina organization worked with our South Carolina Chamber of Commerce and the NFIB to pass a Regulatory Flexibility Act modeled after the federal law. Last August, the then chairman of the South Carolina Small Business Regulatory Review Committee told me that over the previous 7 years, his committee had reviewed over 300 proposed regulations and identified only 10 that raised their concern. His committee worked with the state agencies promulgating these new regulations and satisfactorily resolved the issues. The Regulatory Flexibility Act has created an effective process to protect small businesses, even if the process itself needs some attention from time to time. Mr. Holman correctly identifies one area where the EPA's compliance with the RFA can be improved: more resources for the rulemaking process. While there are voices we hear in Washington critical of the EPA and calls for cutting back or freezing the regulatory process, the reality is that it can work better for small businesses and the public if the EPA was better funded. With more resources, the EPA can do a better job of meeting the requirements of the RFA to the benefit of a small business. However, more resources for the EPA would not only allow the agency to be more efficient and effective in complying with the RFA, it would also enable the organization to do a better job of protecting the public's and environment's health while unleashing entrepreneurial innovations and creating jobs. Every responsible new rule that protects the health of our citizens and workers opens a door to newer and better products. Our nation is loaded with these small business entrepreneurs just waiting to solve a problem when the demand is created. The Toxic Substance Control Act is so outdated that the EPA's resources so strained that there are literally over 80,000 chemicals in the agency's inventory, but it's only been able to require testing for only about 200. Just yesterday, the state of California took the lead on investigating the health hazards of toxic flame retardant chemicals used in furniture and mattresses, while not providing protection from fires. The EPA should be examining this national hazard, but it doesn't have the resources. Can the materials we sleep in and sleep on and sit on be non-toxic and still resist fire? Absolutely. Ask Barry Chick, owner of Naturepedic in Cleveland, Ohio. Naturepedic manufactures baby and crib mattresses that provide proper support, meet government flammability requirements, provide waterproofing, seamless designs, and other hygienic features, all without the use of harmful chemicals or allergic materials. But instead of helping this innovative industry take off and make bedding healthier for families, we protect the use of carcinogen materials of the past by not properly empowering the EPA with the needed legislative resources and support. The public and small business owners want good regulations. A recent national poll of small business owners conducted for the American Sustainable Business Council found that 80% support disclosure regulations of toxic materials, 79% support ensuring clean air and water, and 61% support moving the country towards energy efficiency and clean energy. It is very clear that the future of our economy really depends on our tying to sustainable economy. And the EPA really has the opportunity, if we take this opportunity to empower them and give them the resources to actually move us toward that sustainable economy faster. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knapp. Our third witness is Jeff Brendiger. He's the Director of Utilities for Orville Utilities, which is located in Orville, Ohio. Mr. Brendiger started with Orville Utilities as a plant engineer in 1987. He serves as American Municipal Powers Board on the American Municipal Powers Board of Trustees as an active member of the American Public Power Association. He is APPA's small generation representative and serves on the Energy, Environmental, and Government Relations Committees. He has served on several EPA small business advocacy review panels, including the panel on Boiler Mac Major and other area source rules. Mr. Brendiger, thanks for coming in from Ohio. Appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Brediger. I'm the Utility Director for Orrville Utilities in Orrville, Ohio. I'm presenting this testimony today on behalf of Orrville Utilities and American Public Power Association, of which my municipal utility is a member of. APPA is a national service organization representing the interests of more than 2,000 non-for-profit, community-owned electric utilities that serve over 46,000 Americans. Under the SBREFA Act, 90% of these utilities themselves are considered small businesses, and in addition to that, they are serving the small businesses in their communities. Orrville is a small city of about 8,300 located in northern part of Ohio. Some may recognize Orrville from its association as the home of the J.M. Smucker Company, our largest employer of over 1,500 employees. Our community owns its own coal-fired power plant, which has enabled us to offer competitively priced electricity to our customers since 1917, has helped promote local business development efforts, and has protected our customers from volatile electricity markets. But as environmental requirements tighten, Orrville utilities face increasingly cost burdens, and it's important that these burdens provide important services to our community. Our greatest concern is the EPA's Boiler MACT rule, which was to be finalized this spring, which after several rounds of legal challenges, reconsiderations, and proposals we're still waiting for that. In 2003, I participated with APPA in the SBREFA review process for the Boiler MACT rule. I also served as a small entity representative in the latest SBREFA effort on the current proposed rule. The SBREFA process was important to Orrville and other small electric generators because small utilities and small governments were a subset of those being regulated by the Boiler MACT rule, and the EPA was not focused on the burdens of these entities. The primary recommendation from the SBREFA panel proposed that the EPA implement a health-based compliance alternative that would allow entities to avoid significant costs of hydrogen chloride scrubbers when they could demonstrate their emissions did not pose a significant health risk. This proposed solution would have provided significant cost relief for small entities while maintaining protective of human health. The EPA had the discretion to adopt it under the Clean Air Act, but failed to do that. In our view, the process failed. When coupled with the President's 2001 executive order on regulatory reform, SBREFA should ensure that the needs of small businesses are thoroughly addressed as a regular consideration of the regulatory process for certain agencies' rules. But the process has fallen short of desired expectations. In some cases, the EPA has declined to convene a panel to evaluate small entity relief. When panels are convened, they may lack the information necessary to generate effective alternatives. When effective alternatives are generated, the EPA may ignore the results. Our recent experience with SBREFA has been disappointing at best. While the SBREFA process is intended to provide small entities with an expanded opportunity to participate in the development of certain regulations, the process lately has taken on more of a window dressing, with the EPA simply checking the box to indicate that a requirement has been met, even if done insufficiently. In addition, poor preparation by EPA staff has wasted the time and resources of panel participants, and too little time is invested in the panel process to allow participants to properly review and comment on detailed technical materials and issues. Perhaps most disturbing is when the panels produce a viable alternative, only to have the EPA ignore the recommendation coming from those with real-world operational experience. Despite our misgivings regarding our experiences with the SBREFA process, Orrville and APPA thoroughly endorsed the concept of a specialized process to seek, consider, and incorporate the specific needs of small entities in the regulatory process. In our written statement, we do offer specific recommendations for improving the SBREFA process. Also, I'll add, as a local government, we do share the same concerns. It's not that we do not want to do anything. We struggle with the requirements that are totally unnecessary. In conclusion, I commend this committee for holding this hearing today. It is clear that some important changes need to be made to the way the EPA performs its duties under SBREFA, and we look forward to those improvements. I thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brediger. Our final witness is David Merrick, who is the President of Merrick Design and Build, which is a full-service residential and commercial remodeling, designing, and building company located in Kensington, Maryland. Mr. Merrick is an active member of the National Association of Remodeling Industry and currently serves as chairman of the Government Affairs Committee. Thank you for being here today. I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm pleased to present this testimony on behalf of the National Association of the Remodeling Industry. NARI is a nonprofit trade association based in Des Plaines, Illinois. We have 58 chapters in major metro areas nationwide, and our membership of 7,000 companies is comprised of remodeling contractors, local suppliers, and national suppliers. 83% of NARI members have fewer than 20 employees, and many are one- or two-man operations. A new thought about small business. I run a design-build company in Kensington, Maryland. Merrick Design Build is a full-service residential and commercial remodeling, design, and build company. In 2010, when EPA decided to change the LRRP rules, NARI was disappointed. We worked with several contracting, home building, and remodeling businesses to express our concerns in comments to EPA that we submitted in July of 2010. With the Chairman's permission, I would like to submit our comments for the record. They are from July 21, 2010, and were written by Baker Botts, LLP, and submitted to the EPA on amendments to LRRP. Thank you, sir. Fundamental to our concerns were the removal of the opt-out provision and EPA's refusal to reconvene a group of small businesses. The U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy and the Office of Management and Budget to ensure flexibility in the rulemaking for small businesses. NARI's concerns with EPA moving forward with a public and commercial building rule are threefold. First, we are concerned that the EPA may proceed without convening a SBREFA Small Business Advocacy Review Panel. We do not want the same thing to happen when EPA proposed the 2010 amendments to LRRP, that a rule move forward without a SBREFA panel. Second, NARI is concerned that EPA may move forward with a public and commercial LRRP rule without clear evidence and data showing that lead poisoning risk to children under 6 and pregnant women from construction activities at public and commercial buildings. If the EPA cannot present a clear connection between the activity and the risk to children and pregnant women, then our customers certainly will not understand why their projects have become more expensive. Third, when EPA moves forward with the rule, NARI would advise that the agency make rules flexible enough to cover different scenarios. This is what NARI member Kevin Now advised the EPA during meetings last year. With the Chairman's permission, I would like to submit Kevin Now's letter to EPA from March 1, 2011 for the record. Thank you. NARI is pleased with the opportunity to advise the committee about how EPA interacts with small business when the agency develops regulations. The SBREFA process was designed to codify what simply makes sense, for small businesses to work with EPA to come up with constructive solutions for complex problems. It seems as though the process works when EPA listens to the input from the Office of Advocacy and from small business. It does not seem to work when EPA rushes the process or avoids it altogether. We will continue to work with the EPA. We will try and increase our customers' knowledge of LRRP rules, and we will continue to work with remodelers to increase EPA certification. Our dialogue with EPA is important because NARI should be EPA's partners in our efforts to protect children and pregnant women from lead-based dangers caused by remodeling activities. Thank you for your attention to these important matters.
Thank you very much to all of our witnesses, and we'll start with our questions, and we'll start with Mr. Schilling.
Thank you, Chairman. The first question I have would be for Mr. Knapp. And thank you all for coming to the panel. I really appreciate it. Did I hear in your opening statement that you say, and maybe just clarify this for me, I kind of opened up when I heard it. Did you say that more money for the EPA is what is needed? So basically what I heard, and tell me if I'm wrong, is more money for the EPA for more regulation is going to help the economy.
Congressman, what I heard and what I read in the testimony today was that there's concern that the EPA is not fulfilling all the requirements of the RFA, that they sometimes move faster than they should move. And what that tells me, as somebody who's been around for a while, is that maybe they don't have the resources, that they They may aspire to do these things, but like any organization that does not have sufficient resources, they start moving things quicker. And so that's what I meant. I mean, literally, if we want them to do the perfect job for small businesses and comply with all of the RFA to the letter of the law, then they need to have the resources to do that. And that will serve all these gentlemen up here much better. And so, yes, I hate to say this, but I think that that there are resources and support for the EPA could solve a lot of the problems that you've heard today.
Very good. And then the RFA requires federal agencies to analyze the impact of regulations on small entities. Do you think this is a good idea?
The RFA, absolutely, it's a good idea. I mean, from our experience in South Carolina, again, a friend of mine who Congressman Mulvaney knows, Monty, he headed that organization, for the original chairman of it, went for 7 years, analyzed 300 regulations being promulgated by state agencies in South Carolina, found 10 that they weren't happy with. They worked with those agencies, and it all worked out. So, yes, small businesses need to have that type of protection, that type of input that we were talking about into the process with the RFA.
Okay. Earlier last year, we had the head of the EPA in on the Ag Committee, and what we talked about is the apparatuses that they were going to have the farmer actually wear. And one of the questions to Ms. Jackson was, do you know how much these cost? And she said she wasn't sure. Do you know if they're 50, 500, 5,000? But that, in itself says that they didn't bring in the farmer to ask the question. Now, they've been talking for quite some time about regulating farm dust. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
What I'd like to do is, Mr. Merrick, how many people do you employ, sir?
We have 16 full-time employees.
And is keeping your workers and clients safe one of your top priorities?
Keeping our workers and clients safe is a fundamental aspect of business. If we don't take care of our workers, they won't be around, they won't do their job, and if we don't take care of our customers, they won't come back and they won't recommend us to other customers.
As a small business owner trying to do your best to comply with EPA rules, what's your greatest fear in dealing with the EPA?
My greatest fear would be that they don't listen to us or don't ask our advice.
And then, I got plenty of time, all right. Basically, members who are certified on lead-safe work practices lost business because of the lead paint rule. Would that be a fair statement?
The business is still out there, and there are people doing the jobs. The largest problem right now is the lack of enforcement. EPA has identified almost 650 small entities that this rule will cover, and has certified 123,000 firms. That's 20%.
Very good. With that, I yield back. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Chairman Graves, for holding this hearing. It's been interesting. I was, I keep saying I'm the new kid on the block, but actually come next week, I think I will actually have been here a year. And I really have loved being on the Small Business Committee, and I've convened a Small Business Advisory Council that advises me on issues and legislation that Congress is, considering how it does impact small businesses. And I've gone around and talked to over 100 small businesses myself, because I want to know, what can the federal government do? Or can we be more helpful? Should we get out of the way? What's a burden? What's keeping you from succeeding, from growing, from hiring? Because I believe, like a lot of people here, that small businesses really are the backbone of our economy. I think they're the key to actually turning this economy around. They're the ones that are actually hiring folks right now. So we want to do what we can to support them. But when I talk to them, I'm not hearing as much about that it's the environmental regulations that are keeping them back. They always love to say, Janice, we need more customers. That's what's going to help us. We want the economy to turn around. We want other people to have jobs so that they can spend their money in our businesses. And in my community in Los Angeles, it's actually been some of the environmental regulations that have created small businesses. We've had very strict environmental regulations at the Port of Los Angeles, and what it's done is create this whole new technology, this clean air technology that spawned businesses that use algae to reduce stationary source emissions. It's allowed an electric truck company to actually create the first long-haul electric truck, and this guy has actually sold his electric drive system to China, and he's created about 150 jobs. So I know regulations can be burdensome, and I know that's what we're hearing today. But for me and Mr. Merrick, I'm trying to being on this committee, I know that we oversee the Small Business Administration. So I want to get a sense from you in the context of the EPA and some of these regulations. What's been your experience or some of your other small businesses that directly with the Small Business Administration in helping you comply with regulations or helping explain some of the regulations that are coming down? How's that experience been? And is that an area that we could probably maybe do a better job of? I mean, it's all about resources with the SBA as well, but is that a better connection with small businesses from the federal government's perspective that we can actually help with some of these problems?
I wouldn't say that the EPA has gone out of its way to be helpful, and I'd like to start by making a point about in remodeling what a small business is. Most remodelers are one- or two-man operations, and record keeping for them can be a huge burden. Many of them, their idea of record keeping is a shoebox that they dump receipts in and dump them on their accountant's lap at tax time. So asking them to do any kind of regulation, bookkeeping, is a burden on them. And as you pointed out with the new businesses that are created, as new businesses are created, old businesses sometimes have to go away. And one of the unfortunate side effects of regulations is these smaller one- or two-man businesses simply don't have the resources within their own organization to function with all the regulations. My primary concern as a small businessman is the economy. And as I look at my business, I'm large enough to keep records properly, and I live in fear of the EPA walking into my operation and not criticizing me on the way I protect people from lead paint, but on the records that I'm keeping about how I did that.
And again, you didn't really comment on the Small Business Administration.
That was a long question.
What's your interaction? I know, and a lot of pontificating too. What's your experience with them?
With the small business?
Yeah, with the SBA. Are they helping you comply with some of these, or to understand some of these regulations, or is that a resource that you even access?
Yeah, I would say it's a resource that I don't access, and I can't honestly answer that question.
Okay. And when I get my bid from the contractor on remodeling, should I triple the time and double the money? Just kidding.
No, but I do have a card.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. West?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the panel for being here. And I think everyone agrees there has to be some, regulation that is out there to make sure that we do have a free market that operates properly and does not put the consumer at a disadvantage. But I think there's a simple maxim out there that the more you regulate something, the less you get of it. I'm down in the state of Florida, and we have the EPA suing our state over this thing called numeric nutrient criteria, which is basically telling our farmers and some of our local municipalities that they have to produce storm drains or runoff water that's parts per billion purer than rainwater. And, of course, when they were challenged, the EPA couldn't tell them where they got that formula from. We've got we're big in the maritime industry down along the coastline there, southeast coast. Twin V catamarans, the gentleman there, Roger, had to hire an EPA compliance assistant because of all the regulations that were coming down as far as, construction and gasoline tank construction and motors and things of that nature. And that one EPA compliant assistant caused him to not be able to hire 3 people to build boats. And so, my question to you all, the panel, is, do you all believe that the small business, the Flexibility Act, the panel that works with the Regulatory Flexibility Act, they are failing? in trying to constrain or rein in the EPA as far as listening to you and taking into account some of the ramifications thereof on your businesses or industries or what have you before they issue these regulations? And before I close out and get your response, Lisa Jackson came up here, the administrator of the EPA, last year before the Energy and Commerce Committee, and when she was asked, does she take in the economic impact of the regulations that they're producing, she said no. And that's the problem that I have. So I'd like to know what impact are you seeing, and whether you believe the Small Business Regulatory Flexibility Act and the panel is really meeting up to its intents, or you're just getting steamrolled.
Congressman, thank you very much. By the way, it's a pleasure to meet you this way.
Thank you.
Not sure what that's about. Thank you, Congressman.
We're all from the South, Mick.
I
We
know.
can like each other.
We try to be polite, don't we?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Mick's not polite.
Look, there's always that balance. There's always that balance between protecting the health and safety of our people and our environment and not having that heavy burden. And that's what the RFA is supposed to look at least for the small businesses who will be impacted by those regulations. To the degree they may not be being able to work with everybody to the extent they need it, I will go again and say that a lot of it comes back to resources. I don't think that the EPA has
I don't think the EPA needs more stuff.
Well, that's not what I hear here, but that's okay. If you want good quality work out of any organization, whether it be private sector or public sector, you've got to make sure that it has the adequate funds to do the job. And I don't think the EPA has any malevolency in it. Can they do better from time to time? Probably can, but so can every organization. But thank you, sir.
But in 2011, the federal government added over 71,000 pages of new regulations to the Federal Registry. That is unconscionable to me. And look, 22 years in the United States military, I understand accomplishing the mission without having a whole lot of resources. And I think that the focus of the EPA is really counterproductive to our small businesses and our free market growth. And that's what I'm trying to get the understanding. Are they really listening to you? Is there any consequence out there for them not listening to you?
The answer is no, they're not listening, in my opinion. The EPA has some very intelligent people on staff. When we convene these SBREFA panels, we bring a very talented group of people together with the common goal of trying to understand these very complex issues. And from my perspective, we're just choosing to ignore those or water them down or discount them. For example, these recent recommendations that the panel made on our Boiler Act to preclude the addition of scrubbers. For our community, we are looking at this rulemaking alone costing anywhere from $8.5 to $12 million per unit, and we have 4 units, sir. And our budget is only $30 million. These scrubbers alone add in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million to those overall costs. The EPA just doesn't seem to want to recognize what those costs or take the data that our panel members bring into case. They say, well, we've done our study, we've done our own economics, but we seem, in my opinion, sir, off by magnitudes of 3 or 4 in some of these estimates. And the EPA says, we've done our estimates, check the box, we've done our job, time to move on.
Well, if I can ask just a short follow-on. The people that you're talking about showing you their work, are they really and truthfully, familiar? Do they have experience in your industry, or are they just sitting back crunching numbers?
Somewhat.
Come on now, throw the dog a bone, okay? You gotta give me a definitive answer. You sound like a politician. You running for office?
No, try not to be, sir.
Okay.
Generally not. I'd say if you're looking for to try to match the expertise that the panel members bring to these committees and match that up against the who the agency brings into the table, we have a far superior panel member on board, and that's where a lot of the rub's at. We fail both on defending economics. We are technically more superior, in my opinion. But
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Hanna.
Mr. Knapp, how you doing?
I'm on the hot seat tonight, aren't I?
No, I don't think so. I think people are sitting here wondering if you're really a businessman or not.
I can assure you, sir, I've been for quite a number of years.
Me too. I have a quick question. For these SBREFA reviews, the S-bar you call it, Mr. Holman, you said significant economic impact or substantial number for a substantial number of small entities. Those are all of those subjective words.
Correct.
Right. Well, what does that mean?
What it means is Congress apparently wanted each agency to look at each situation and try to decide for that given rulemaking in that situation and those regulated entities, what is a significant economic impact and what is a substantial number of small entities. So what most agencies, including EPA, have done is to develop guidance documents for their rule writers that set out sort of rules of thumb that they go by and how they make that determination in each case.
Can you give me an idea what that looks like? Because that's also so subjective that it doesn't pin down the agency to have these panels
Yeah, I mean,
at all.
I'm going to paint a little bit broadly, but EPA generally says if a rule is likely to have more than a 3% economic impact on small entities, and it affects, it's a sliding scale, but let's say it's 1,000 or more small entities are going to be impacted by the rule, then there's no way that they can avoid having to go through the panel process under their guidance.
But you said out of, I think, 300, they had reviewed 10?
That's in South Carolina.
In South Carolina, right.
That's a state rule, that has nothing to do with the federal RFA.
Wouldn't that suggest you, though, that the rulemaking procedure is skewed in favor of an agency that, if whether it's understaffed or disinterested, would be able to rush to judgment?
Yes. And I can actually give you some
Go
my
ahead.
thoughts on the resource issue. I mean, I agree that it's tempting to say, wow, we should just throw more money at EPA because they need to do this job correctly because it's an important job. But having watched this process work pretty well during the mid-2000s, I know that EPA can do this job when they want to. They do a good job on panels when they're interested in doing a good job on panels. Resources are not really the problem. It's the fact that this is not a high priority for the agency at this time.
As a matter of fact, the rules, aren't they, forgive me for interrupting, but aren't they set up to actually advance the procedure more quickly? It wouldn't the fact that they're understaffed tend to give them an excuse to have fewer panels?
I think that happens. I think the biggest, most obvious reason that they use to say we don't have time to do a panel is we've agreed to a deadline or we have a deadline put upon us. We just don't have time to do a panel.
So an artificial deadline can be the cause to undermine a rule that's designed to protect businesses and hence almost automatically undo the very thing it's designed to do.
Yes, and what we've seen in the last few years is more and more what I call multi-billion-dollar rules that have huge impact on the economy, including small businesses. And that, unfortunately, the agency often treats a small business the same way they treat, a large corporation. And because we don't go through this panel process, there's never a chance of trying to figure out how are these small guys different from the big guys.
Then would you say it might be inappropriate for the agency to be in charge of what it decides or doesn't decide to review? Wouldn't it be appropriate to have an outside source that to decide what panels, what item, what issue should have a panel and which one should not?
Ideally, that would be very good if there was an agency like OIRA that would decide, is this an appropriate thing not to be going through a panel?
Right. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of environmental agencies in my life, in my own business, and so much can change from individual to individual. You have different inspectors on different days and different outcomes and hugely different costs to whatever I was doing. But all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mulvaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Knapp, welcome.
Thank you,
Good to see a
Congressman.
fellow South Carolinian. Mr. West commented on his way out that he didn't think you were really from South Carolina. I assured him that you were. One of the things that I've learned in the short time that I've been here is that I'm going to disagree with folks all the time. We do these hearings all the time, and we always hear opposing views, which I always appreciate. I've also come to know, however, that I'd like to know where the information is coming from. If I'm on a hearing and I have Heritage and I have Brookings, I can understand where they're coming from. If I've got an economist from Yale and one from the University of Chicago, I've got a sense for where I'm coming from. So anytime I get a group that comes in and calls themselves the Small Business Chamber of Commerce from any state, South Carolina or wherever, which at one time or another has supported Dodd-Frank, the public option in health care, cap and trade, thought the stimulus was too small, supports Boiler Act, opposed tort reform, and then actually was advocating for a brand new state small business government agency, as your organization has done all of those things. I want to talk a little bit about who you all are. And I think it's a fair question. You've heard other folks say today that they can't believe someone from a small business group is saying some of the things you're saying. The group has actually come up before in conversation. And if we could actually, before I ask a question, I've got the stuff off your website, and there's your affiliated groups, your members and all that. And one of the groups that's been here before us is the Main Street Alliance. You folks are affiliated with that group?
The Main Street Alliance is an organization we have worked for. We don't have any formal affiliation with them other than we have partnered on issues at the national level before.
Gotcha. And how long has that relationship gone on?
We've probably been working with the Main Street Alliance on issue on and off probably for the last 3 years.
Could we play my video, please? Is that ready? Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Chairman, may I, for the record, point out that we do not have an affiliate in South Carolina, and we are not affiliated with the Small Business Chamber of Commerce.
To that point, if I may reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman, now, actually, what I went on to tell Mr. Daly in that time was your site, your organization was linked on their website, as yours is. Later that day, your organization came off of their website. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Mr. Daly telling us the truth when he said he's not affiliated with you folks at all?
Well, Congressman, if I might, I think that was very unfair of you to do that to Bill Daly, who's a friend of mine. He did not know you were going to bring that up. He had no idea where that came from. He is not responsible for what goes on the website of the Main Street Alliance. So I think that was really, really unfair of you to do that. So I just want to put that out right away.
Why did you think it was unfair, Mr. Knapp?
It's unfair because the gentleman was there to talk about another issue altogether. And for you to bring up and start talking about the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce, which was not invited to the table, I don't think it's up to Mr. Daly to defend us. I can do that very well, thank you.
Well, was it up to Mr. Daly to not tell us the truth about his affiliation with your organization?
He was not telling you the truth.
So you think
he does not run that website. He doesn't know who put that on there or what it says. But all it does is the same as ours. We have a relationship from time to time with the small business majority, with the Main Street Alliance, with some other organizations. That doesn't mean we're part of them. We just have good relationships with them and want to promote them to other people that come to our website.
I don't remember what Mr. Daly's title is with the Main Street Alliance. I do remember, however, that he had enough influence over the website to take your organization off of it before the end of the day.
And I can assure you that Mr. Daly did not do that because I got contacted by Sam Blair, who is with the administration of the Main Street Alliance. He told me what went on. He sent me that video, which I was appalled at, and they did remove it because, frankly, sir, you intimidated them.
I think it's always fair, Mr. Knapp, to know the motivations for the people who are giving testimony here, and to know who they're affiliated with, know who they really are. And again, if you're going to be the Small Business Chamber of Commerce and come in and say things like, what I really think will bump up the economy is to give the EPA more money, then you can fully expect us to start asking some questions about your organization, the Main Street Alliance. In fact, let's talk about your organization.
Well, no, let me interrupt you, sir.
No, you don't get to do that, actually, Mr. Knapp. We're not on your radio show.
When it's my turn, I will bring it up.
We're not on your radio show yet.
Thank you, sir.
Let's talk about your organization. You advertise as having 5,000+ members. How many of those are members of the South Carolina Academy of Trial Lawyers? Oh, I'm sorry, the new name is the South Carolina Association
for Justice. We provide membership, we grant membership to the associations that belong as trade associations. This has been a long standard of ours. So when the South Carolina Association for Justice becomes a member and has a board member, we convey membership on all of them. Doesn't mean that they're paying dues. but we convey a membership, and we count them toward
In
that
fact,
effect.
it's free to be a member of your association.
You can, absolutely, sir. We've always been under the principle that we'd rather have more members than more money. Now, that means we live hand to mouth, but it also means that we get to communicate our message to the members, to the people of South Carolina, to the small businesses, and we find that it resonates.
But of your 5,000 plus members, and is it 6,000 or is it about 5,000? Is that fair? That's what your website says.
Yes, sir.
How many of those are you counting are members of the Academy of Association for Justice?
That's probably about, I'd say that their membership is probably around 1,500.
Okay. And then how many of your members in that 5,000 are members of the workers' comp bar?
They're all, as you probably know, sir, the Injured Workers Advocates and the Association for Justice basically have overlapping membership.
Gotcha. All right. Do you have any home builders who are your members?
You know, we used to have the home builders as a trade association, and then they dropped off as a trade association member. We still have our heating and air conditioning members of our association.
So you don't have any home builders as members?
No, we do not have the trade association.
Okay. Do you have any home builders?
I cannot answer the question of how many or if we have any home builders themselves. I do not look over our membership list.
So if I asked you the question, had you asked your home builder members if they thought it would be a good idea to give the EPA more money, you wouldn't know their response to that?
I would not know I have not asked them that question.
Do you have any remodelers, to Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we do have remodelers. I know we do that.
And did you ask them about your presentation here today that you think giving EPA more money is?
We did not poll our membership and ask them what I should say today, as I imagine that most members did not poll every one of their members to ask them what they are going to say today.
What you refer to a lot of polling in your statements today. Where did those polls come from?
Those polls are national polls conducted on behalf conducted for the American Sustainable Business Council and the Main Street Alliance and the Small Business Majority, and that is where those polling data come from.
Do you have any paving contractors?
We may have paving contractors. I could be glad to go research this when I get back.
And we all reserve the right to ask questions afterwards.
Thank you,
so
sir.
We'd be more than happy to send you those things. I get asked the same thing about convenience store owners, swimming pool installers, auto body shops. I'm just stunned, Mr. Knapp, that, again, as I was with the Main Street Alliance, that somebody comes in and says, look, I represent small business, and I really think the way we can fix things is to give the EPA more money. I've never heard that before from anybody other than the EPA. And other folks who like the EPA a lot. And I'm just stunned. I could ask you the same questions about Boiler Mact, which you support. And I've been through our state. You know, we go home as much as we possibly can, and every small business I go to is scared to death of Boiler Mact, and yet you're here promoting it. You don't get to ask any questions, Mr. Knapp. Again, we're not on your radio show. Which reminds me, this is not, your work with the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce is not your full-time gig, is it?
Although, sir, I do not get paid a full-time salary, or I probably spend majority of my time on the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. And I might add, we have never taken a position on that boiler issue. Never.
Now, a majority of your time, how much of your time is at the Knapp agency, your public relations firm that you own and operate?
Well, I'm not sure that this is under the purview of this committee, but I would probably say about 15–20% of my time is with my public relations firm.
And then how much of it is as the progressive talk show host on WOIC in Columbia?
I have 2 hours a day show every weekday afternoon from 4 to 6, and sir, I invite you to be a guest anytime you want to.
In fact, I listened a couple days ago when you invited in Mr. Matt Gertz, the Deputy Research Director for Media Matters, for his input. You were looking for a responsible media representative to talk about what was going on in the right-wing media, and you invited Media Matters in to do that. And again, do you want to give a plug to the radio? Is it, what, 12:40 a.m. or something?
Well, it's 12:30 a.m. on the dial. You can go to youneedtoknow.info and stream it anytime you want to.
Mr. Knapp, I appreciate you coming here today. You've been a good sport, but again, I think it's important that we understand exactly who's giving us the testimony. By the way, who invited you to be here today?
I was invited to be here today. That invitation came through the American Sustainable Business Council.
But you were a Republican requested witness or a
No,
Democrat?
sir. I was in the minority.
Okay. Again, nothing of what I've tried to do here, Mr. Knapp, is today to undermine the veracity of what you're saying. I actually believe that you believe just about everything that you said.
Thank
and
you,
that's
sir.
not my point here. My point here is to let everybody on this committee know who's giving them testimony, to take that into consideration as we sit here and go through the issues. There is one thing I don't believe, Mr. Knapp, and I'll close with this. You said that you hated to say this, but you really think the EPA should get more money. And I don't believe that. I believe that you really do want to say that, and you really do believe the EPA should get more money. With that, I'll yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our panel for taking the time to be able to be here. I'm a small businessman as well, and one thing that I find incredibly disturbing is in order to be able to fill out all of the forms, be able to fill all of the requirements, we actually have out of the SBA a report that says that we're spending $10,585 per employee to be able to comply. We're facing an incredible debt in this country, and the best solution to that is to be able to get people back to work in this nation and be able to get this economy moving once again. It's going to have to actually come from the private sector. And we know we have a problem with the EPA. One of the first town hall meetings that I held better than a year ago was in the San Luis Valley of Colorado, visiting with potato farmers, and our issues are always about water. They didn't bring up water, they brought up the EPA. The overreach and the tentacles seem to be extraordinary, and we all want clean air, we all want clean water, but we're continuing to see an agency that is continuing to expand and to overreach. And I guess I'd just like to ask the panel, do you think that it is appropriate to have an agency that is writing rules and regulations, and the only way to be able to reverse those once they go final, having the obligatory act of Congress? Should there be a better way? Should Congress be able to roll up its sleeves and actually get involved in this regulatory and review process before the EPA goes final? Mr. Holman?
We've actually, we've supported, the Chamber has supported the REINS Act. There are some questions that come up about how that would work in practice in terms of if it was implemented, but clearly Congress needs to take some increased role in this process. The fact that we have an agency that essentially no one's home in terms of the oversight of the agency in how they do panels and how they do their business in writing billion-dollar rules. Last year in 2011, EPA had 4 rules that are over $1 billion each in the pipeline. More to follow, more coming. We know that. What we are asking in this particular hearing is at least have some place at the table for small businesses. If you say, EPA thinks that's too much work, they don't want to take the time to do it, they don't want oversight from Congress, we would say there needs to be oversight from Congress on that.
Would you agree with that, Mr. Knapp?
I agree with Mr. Holman that poses some problem if Congress has to approve every regulation that is promulgated by an agency. That I think the cumbersomeness of that would be amazing, and given our division in Congress, hard to get anything done. Essentially, I think we'll probably just shut down all future regulations.
So
that doesn't say that.
Are you calling on the U.S. Senate to approve the REINS Act that was passed through the House of Representatives?
No, sir, we are not.
Okay. Mr. Bridger?
Back where I come from, we believe the EPA works under the auspice of Congress, and when we see these regulations rolling out, and when we're looking for relief, we seem to have to find our relief in the federal court system. That troubles us. We should be coming back to this body, seeking the relief and requiring the kind of oversight that's necessary before the genie pops out of the bottle. We seem to be chasing our tail all the way around. We think it's this Congress's job to stop some of these things before they come out, so we can use these panels, for example, to complement the work that should be done.
So effectively what you're saying is if the EPA is asking for input, maybe it'd be a good idea if they listened?
Yes.
Not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea, sir.
Mr. Merrick?
To expect that every rule that comes out of the EPA would be perfect and ready for the street every time, I think, is far-fetched. There ought to be some kind of review process to review the rule once they've been implemented and see how it's working. And I know we've gone back to the EPA, and they are very gracious about meeting with us. They take our comments and disappear behind the doors, and we never hear from them again.
And I've forgotten again. You'd mentioned in your testimony that the EPA had set emission limits that were unachievable based on their failed calculations. Is this pretty common occurrence?
I believe that would be.
Was that for Mr. Bridger? Yeah.
The answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have limits that are beyond where technology exists today. Yes, sir.
And they have limits on our work that are beyond capability, too.
Great. Well, do you think maybe if we really want to be able to fix something, Mr. Knapp, maybe you want to be able to jump in on this as well? The last I was able to read, and numbers may have adjusted up, down, but it was about a $10.8 billion budget, something along those lines for the EPA. If we really want to fix the problem, maybe we take some of that money that's already been appropriated rather than putting a burden back on a business, and we actually fix the problem? Would that be an approach?
Well, as you have already heard my testimony, I think part of the problem that these gentlemen are experiencing is because of the lack of resources and support for the EPA. So I don't know that by cutting their budget even more and doing something else with it is going to get any better outcomes than what they're getting now.
So forget the goal, just increase the bureaucracy. So.
Sir, it's not a matter of increasing the bureaucracy, but if Congress has given them instructions and provided them with a document called the RFA, and they are to carry it out to the best extent to try to work with these organizations, and if they have too quick a deadlines, and if they don't think they're getting short shrift, then there may be a problem of resources, and that's the way they're dealing with it.
I'm over time, and I guess what's really disturbing about that is we continue to hear testimony from a variety of different sources that the EPA does not listen, that it is agenda-driven from within, and the RFA is something that they aren't really paying attention to. And the impacts that we're truly seeing on small business across this nation in real lives is devastating right now to the economy, and we need to be able to find a better common sense balance to it. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
With that, I want to thank all of you for participating in the hearing. When the EPA fails to comply with the Regulatory Flexibility Act, small businesses suffer, and I think that the quality of rules that the EPA promulgates, I think that suffers also. The EPA should be working collaboratively with small businesses to ensure that small business impacts are analyzed and that that less burdensome alternatives are considered. For the record, I want to say that tomorrow the EPA Administrator, Lisa Jackson, is testifying before the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and we're going to be submitting a letter for the record outlining the concerns with EPA's compliance with the RFA that were raised in today's hearing. And in addition, we'll continue to exercise our oversight responsibilities to ensure that federal agencies do comply with the RFA. And with that, I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, that is so ordered. And with that, the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
What's that? Oh, yes, that's right. That's what I'd like. Thank you so much. Okay.